I think it goes without saying that Final Fantasy VII is not only the best game in the series, but it has been deemed as one of the most ambitious RPGs that's ever been made. Hell, the game was such a bestseller that it pretty much put Sony's PlayStation at the height of its popularity. FF7 had a certain charm to it that made it more memorable than any other games in the genre, even leading to the game itself having its own spin-offs. So when it was revealed that Final Fantasy VII was being released for the PlayStation 4, Square Enix knew they had to not only remake a game, they had to reshape a legacy. Now, some of you probably have seen my hour-long gameplay of the demo, as well as me pretty much talking about the demo, which if you haven't, I suggest you check it out, and the links will be in the description below. But the points I made about the demo still stand here, but I'll do my best to go into detail for those that haven't been playing the game. And also, I will try to keep my experiences spoiler free. So if you haven't played the game, don't worry, I'm not going to spoil anything. So in the game, you take on the role of Cloud Strife, an ex-soldier who was once a member of an organization called Shinra, who are draining the life force of the planet, or known as Mako, which is slowly killing the planet itself. With the help of the freedom fighting group known as Avalanche, led by their leader Barret, Cloud discovers that there's more to Shinra's goals than it seems. Now, in the original game, like every other Final Fantasy game, it was a traditional turn-based RPG where you and other members of your party attack an opponent and wait for the opponent to attack while using their limit system, which is if your character takes enough damage, which build up the limit gauge to where you will use it in order to pretty much perform a signature attack from each different character. However, in the remake, it's an action RPG reminiscent of other Square titles such as Final Fantasy 15 or the Kingdom Hearts series, and instead of taking a lot of damage in order to fill the gauge, you now have to give a lot of damage in order to fill it. Not only does this make it easier for newcomers to the series, but it also makes it a lot more fun to pretty much deal more damage. That's not to say that the game is easy though. There are certain battles in the game where you have to strategize and plan your moves carefully. You can't just rush in and expect to attack and slash your way through easily, unless you play the game on easy mode. Speaking of attacks, let's talk about the characters and their special skills. Cloud is the heavy hitter who swings his iconic Buster Sword and with quick swings, and also comes with 2 attack options. One is the commando option, is when he pretty much fights at his medium speed, blocks incoming attacks, and can move and evade freely on the battlefield. While in Punisher mode though, he will pretty much be locked in a fighter stance to where he'll swing his sword as fast as a Belmont can swing his whip, inflicting massive damage, and instead of blocking, he will perform counterattacks when his enemies attack him. But the downside to this is that he won't move as fast, and he pretty much can't even dodge and evade like he would. But hey, the lack of mobility means more badassery. Barret pretty much is armed with his right-handed gun, literally, and will attack at a distance to provide cover for his allies, and will pretty much give the enemy some bullets for their pain. He can use his special move, which is called the Overcharge, which fires 3 powerful rounds into his enemies and cause major damage. Tifa brings her fists and legs to any fight, and as the hits keep on coming, whatever she's hitting winds up broken. Aerith can use her magic to pretty much make up her lack of fighting to perform powerful spells in order to destroy her enemies or heal her allies. And just like the other Final Fantasy titles, you can use magic, summons, and other abilities, but only in the form of small orbs called materia that helps you decide what specific abilities you want for certain characters to have. Each decision that you have to make in the game plays a part in your gameplay style, and when you're not fighting monsters or things trying to kill you, there are side missions and mini games that will pretty much keep you occupied. What blew me away about this game was the amount of world building they had to go through. Yeah, I get it, it's 2020 and a lot of games have large worlds in them, but imagine a remake of a 1997 classic and just rebuilding the world at a much grander scale to where it's unbelievable. The game makes you feel like you're watching a movie like Advanced Children or something. When I look up at Midgard from the Sector 7 slums, it gave me a much better feel of the world that I was in. What I pretty much mean from that is that playing the original game, you don't really get the same feel as you do. You pretty much get a view from the world at a top-down kind of view, but you don't really get an understanding for the world. Sure, the Sector 7 slums is literally right below another city, but how do you know that unless you're actually looking up? But in the game, it pretty much gives you that feel, that scale, like you're in another world and you actually feel it. But what really hits home for me, other than the look of the game itself, is actually the story, honestly. Final Fantasy VII was well known for its story and characters and how you've grown to feel for these characters, and in the remake, there are some moments that actually made me get a little teary-eyed. Every time these characters interact with one another, whether it's voice acting or the story itself, it just makes it so believable. Their pain, their loss, and their friendship resonates with you and makes you feel happy or sad depending on the character, and I love that. It's what made the game a household name for itself back when it was released in 1997, and it still holds up today. Especially the moments between Cloud and whoever he's pretty much talking to. See him grow as a character. In the beginning of the game, he pretty much had a hard-edged personality. He pretty much trusts no one, and all he cares about is pretty much getting paid. But as you pretty much play the game further on, you start to see him care. You start to see him break out of that shell. You start to see him actually trust people, and to pretty much see him actually interact and show some emotions like that. And not just with him, but with other characters like Aerith. Like, I love Aerith in the original game, but I felt like they didn't really give her all that much of a character. She's just the overly nice girl who pretty much sells flowers and helps out Cloud in the game. But you don't really get a feel for her character. Even in Advent Children, they didn't really give much of a clue about her character to begin with to make you actually care for her. Now, don't get me wrong, she still resonated with a lot of gamers back then, but in this game, they actually gave more to it. And then there's also Tifa and Barret, Marlene, and other characters that you probably have remembered from the game. It gives them all more distinctive personalities to where you actually feel more for them than you did back in 1997. But that's enough for me about this game and all my feelings and whatnot, so I'm gonna go ahead and let my buddy Samurai Shadow pretty much give his thoughts about the game. So take it away.
Sup nerds, it's Samurai Shadow, and this ought to be good practice for when I do animated video rants in the not so distant future. There's still some prep work to do that, so for right now I'm just going to help out a friend with his Final Fantasy VII Remake review. Now, when people think of Final Fantasy games, Final Fantasy VII is generally the first game that comes to mind, and it's been sitting at the forefront of the minds of Final Fantasy fans for the better part of 2 decades. People have been screaming for a remake, and I mean screaming, but it doesn't come as easily as people think, such as changes that needed to be made between the remake and the original. I mean, there's been a lot of complaints about, you know, game size and length and all that. None of that stuff really matters, considering they're taking a 2D or, you know, polygonal 3-dimensional game and turning it into a fully 3-dimensional, 4-dimensional immersive RPG that lets you revisit a new flair to an old story. So I mean, you gotta choose exactly what it is you want to complain about. But what I'm going to talk about are specifically changes that needed to be made, and that are like the new characters. Now, speaking specifically about Wall Market, because that's the most notable changes, with Madam M, Chocobo Sam, and Andrea being the 3 that make up the trio in Sector 6, and those needed to be added. Those characters needed to be in Wall Market because it shows the actual story. It adds a new story aspect to a game where originally you kind of just had Barret and Tifa and Aerith tell you, hey, this is going on, Cloud, come with us. And so having it where, you know, you are Cloud and you have to explore, it's like you can be the main character. You don't just sit around and have people tell you what to do and where to go and how to do it. You have to make choices, such as the dress choices. Now, this even took me off guard. It confused me a little bit. How you choose the different outfits for the 3 characters. Now, Tifa is obvious, honestly. You just tell her what you'd like to see her in when she asks you the question in her room back at Sector 7. But for Cloud and Aerith's dresses, those are decided solely on how much of the game you play, and I think that is amazing. Especially since it's not how quickly you get through it, or how much of this you play, or how much of that you do. It's, did you do the side quests, bitch? We can tell, we know whether you did the side quest by what dress you wear. You get the best dress with Aerith by doing all of the side quests in her sector. You get the best dress for Cloud based on how many side quests you do in Wall Market itself. And they want you to redo Wall Market a few times just to pique your interest, because actually they kind of want you to go all the way back to where Tifa asked you to what dress you should wear and play all the way up until wall market, because honestly, they give you an achievement in the game for wearing all 3 dresses for all 3 people, and I think that's hilarious. Characters like Aerith's mom, you actually get a voice and a character for Aerith's mom, and she, you know, you can see her stance on Cloud, you can see her stance on Shinra and soldiers by her demeanor and the way she talks and acts toward Cloud when she finds out he's an ex-soldier. And the only character that was added, was he added? I don't remember if he was originally in the game or not. It's been a while. But the only character I can see as a whole that's completely unnecessary was Johnny. There was just no point in that. And to hear the voice of Suzaku Kurugi and Peter Parker in PS4 Spider-Man play this level of moron kind of like puts a pin in my soul just a little bit. Now, the game's playtype was obviously very important, because the original game, it's just off the 2D standpoint, you just like past Final Fantasy games, it's turn-based combat, you walk around, enemies pop up, you have things to do, but when you're not, you know, traversing polygon land, you go into real image mode during the fights and you can see their actual character, and you know, they have their portrait art in the menus. That was the Final Fantasy formula for so long, but they needed to break that, and they did eventually. But it wasn't largely until Final Fantasy 9, maybe 9 and 10. 10 being the one that generally broke the mold. It was still turn-based, but it wasn't turn-based to where your whole team would go and then the enemy would go, and then it was turn-based in a way where it was swapping back and forth, and you actually had to be a little tactical and evade some attacks and figure out, you know, who's next, who I need to target, you know, that sort of thing. And then they steamrolled over that with the next few games. 12 is all illicit action combat, except for the combat is all, illicit action gameplay, except for combat is all tactical, being that if you want to put in or input actual commands, the game temporarily freezes and you put in the commands and they do the commands. They also had the ability to make it so all you had to do was walk, because you could program everybody's gambits in Final Fantasy 12 to do whatever the hell you wanted them to do when you wanted them to do it. And that was sort of a new concept. It was refined in Zodiac Age, and then they brought it to Final Fantasy 7 Remake, in that you can slow down time a little bit in tactical mode, and you know, a lot of those times Cloud's still getting hit, but you can plan out what you and your teammates are doing. And it also allowed the switching back and forth between teammates to happen, just like in 12. You can swap back and forth between a team of 3 and have anybody being in the leader position, at least during the battle. Well, in Final Fantasy 12, you could switch, and anybody who you're currently landing on will be the leader in and out of the battle. Along with that change to the gameplay, the combat gameplay in Final Fantasy VII Remake, they also brought the ATB stagger system from Final Fantasy 13, which is fantastic as well, because otherwise it would just kind of be, you know, simplified in the way that Final Fantasy 15 was spectacular in combat. We had some great aerial battles, you got some teleporting in there and everything, but you can't really do that too much in a world like Final Fantasy VII that's already been placed out and laid out for you and gone through once already. So they had to build on something that was already there. So you can't start giving Cloud and the others abilities that they didn't have in the original game without being able to justify that, which is kind of like how we were going, how I was talking about Wall Market earlier. They made these new characters to justify why exactly Cloud had to be in a dress. So the changes that were made were a necessary evil or a phantasm for making sure the game ran smoothly and worked properly, and that's why also I think it was a solid idea to have split the game up into parts. Now, I'm not too thrilled about having to, you know, buy 3 standalone $60 games and it's all the same game, but at the same time I can understand the process behind it, and I can't stand people talking about Square Enix needs to fire Nomura and all this other stuff. And honestly, I want to smack the shit out of anyone saying that, because Nomura, without him, we wouldn't have Final Fantasy VII or Kingdom Hearts or any of these things to begin with. So I think that's a reach for people who don't know the industry and have no idea what they're talking about to have any opinion on who's working at Square Enix. But this isn't my video, this isn't my review. Let's get back to KRAZYKentGamer, and you have fun, awesome nerds.
Now, as much as I want to sit here and talk about the game a little bit longer, I don't want to give too much away from this, and especially the fact that there are still certain people out there that haven't played the game yet. Now, the game is quite a surprise of this year, and honestly, it was kind of surprising to pretty much figure out that the game was more of an episodic type of game, which means that Square is going to be releasing more content and story in the future, which I don't really mind at all. To be honest, if the original game was pretty much 4 discs long and pretty much nobody batted an eye on it, especially when other Final Fantasy games of that same era pretty much came out with 4 discs, then it shouldn't be no surprise that Square Enix is going to be bringing us more content about it. Now, whether they're going to make us pay for different episodes or DLC just so we can play the game, I don't really know. Other than that, I pretty much don't mind it. And in my honest opinion, Final Fantasy VII Remake is basically a masterpiece, and it shows that Square Enix has a lot of thought and care put into it, not just because of the fact that they want to remake a game and make it better, but because of the fact that they want to pretty much remake something that the fans wanted to see, something that has stuck with them for many, many years, that they want to see it again, but also pretty much gain a new experience from it. And I think Square Enix nailed that. The game is definitely worth a play just so you can experience it and feel for it for yourself. Hey yo, this is Kent from the future, and I'm gonna try my damn near hardest to not pretty much do this more often when I do my reviews and whatnot, but I'm gonna be doing this every single time when I leave out a certain detail in most of my videos. I'm not gonna do this for every detail I pretty much miss, but at the same time, I'm gonna try my best to pretty much keep everything in the video. But Shadow wanted me to pretty much let you guys know that there was one aspect of the game that we forgot to include, and that was the weapons upgrade system in the game. Now, he wanted me to pretty much tell you guys that it was pretty much a dumbed down version of the Crystarium upgrade system from Final Fantasy 13, where kind of like that one, where every single time when your characters would, you know, level up, you could pretty much give them an upgrade or a boost depending on what aspect of their characteristics that you want to upgrade, like their health, their magic points, their weapons, their attack points, and so on and so forth. And it's pretty much the same thing with the weapon system. Like, for example, like if you pretty much want to upgrade the Buster Sword, and if you have enough points for that, you can pretty much upgrade the Buster Sword so it can do more damage or hold more material, or in this case pretty much do more magic damage, or pretty much have more magic points. Just certain things like that that pretty much make the game a bit more easier and a bit more fun, where it pretty much has you doing a little bit more experimentation and pretty much has you pretty much playing the game and trying to upgrade and trying to think more carefully of how you want your play style to go. Do you want more damage with magic? Do you want more damage with physical attacks? Do you want to pretty much have more slots to pretty much have your materia? Just simple small things like that. But yeah, that was just one little thing that we pretty much missed, I think. But if there was anything else that we probably missed, and you know, you're probably gonna figure it out later on as you play the game anyway, so yeah. It's definitely a game that's worth playing, and it's definitely a game that's pretty much going to be tugging at your heartstrings. And if you don't mind the fact that it's going to be an episodic game, you'll probably get some entertainment out of it anyway. And also, it pretty much has enough mini games and side stories in order to keep you busy. So, if you haven't played the Final Fantasy VII Remake, I highly recommend it. And a special thanks to my buddy Shadow for being a part of this video and giving his thoughts on it. I figured it was best to pretty much hear somebody else's thoughts other than my own to see what they pretty much have from a different perspective. Also, be sure to check out his channel, which I'm going to leave down here in the description below, because he does a lot of live streaming and gaming content like I do, and be sure to check it out and give him some support. But anyway guys, that's going to be it for this video. Be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed it, and also don't forget to ring the bell just so you can be notified for more videos. And also, if you like what you see here, be sure to like it and pretty much share it with your friends. Anyway, I'm KRAZYKent, and I'm out. Peace!